Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this panel discussion on securing quality education, 21st century skills, and the successful transition from school to work in a digital world. This is a side event for the 66th session on the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, and we would like to extend our warmest welcome to the participating audience members, distinguished guests, and of course, our esteemed speakers. My name is Joy Lynn Alagarbis. I am a specialist in event strategy and design based in gender equality at UNICEF headquarters, and I will serve as your moderator for this event. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. This session will be held in English with closed captioning in English and simultaneous interpretation available in International Sign Language, French, and in Spanish. Please select your preferred language by using the globe icon in the webinar control panel. The question and answer function of this webinar is also enabled, and we do encourage you to post your questions here throughout the event, as we will not have a dedicated Q&A portion in our agenda today. The event organizers and our esteemed panelists will be monitoring the Q&A, and we will do our very best to answer your questions during the session through written response. And finally, today's event will be recorded and the video will be posted on the Technology and Innovation Action Coalition website, which is techforgenderequality.org. Now, this side event is sponsored by the Government of Finland and the International Trade Union Confederation, and organized by the leaders of the Generation Equality Action Coalitions on Economic Justice and Rights, and Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. And we can move to the next slide. So as many of you know, the Generation Equality Forum was organized in 2021 to accelerate progress toward the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the full implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action in this United Nations Decade for Action on Gender Equality. It is through Generation Equality that 6 action coalitions were launched, 2 of which are represented here today, the Action Coalitions on Economic Justice and Rights and Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. The Action Coalitions are a unique process that brings together women's, feminist, and youth-led organizations, international organizations, governments, foundations, and businesses, all in a collaborative effort to drive change. The Generation Equality Forum itself kicked off in Mexico almost exactly 1 year ago and culminated in France in June 2021. At the Paris Forum, a global acceleration plan for gender equality was presented, which outlines a roadmap and concrete targets to deliver progress for women and girls in all their diversity. Thousands of commitment makers have now joined the process by making bold and transformative commitments to gender equality, which will be implemented over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. Again, our session today brings together the action coalitions on economic justice and rights and technology and innovation for gender equality. There are many synergies between the 2 action coalitions, and this year's CSW review theme on women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work provided the opportunity to explore just some of the interlinkages between economic justice and technology and innovation. This event will focus on catalyzing change for young women and girls who face constraints to accessing the economy, including the digital economy, before they are even at working age. To offer opening remarks, it is my privilege to invite Ms. Haldis Holst to take the floor, Deputy General Secretary of Education International. Haldis.
Thank you so much, Jolene, and it's a pleasure for me to open and frame this discussion today. As I said, I'm Haldis, I'm a teacher, and I'm Deputy General Secretary of Education International. Education International is a global union federation that brings together organizations of teachers and other education employees from across the world. Totally, we represent more than 32 million educators. And achieving the right to education for girls is key to our work. We represent a profession held mainly by women, working in a sector that research has shown us time and time again is fundamental to achieving gender equality. According to UNESCO estimates, 129 million girls are out of school around the world. And unfortunately, the pandemic, armed conflicts, and climate change-induced disasters have contributed to these figures. And yes, if we look at the Global Acceleration Plan for Gender Equality, we can see many ambitious commitments made towards furthering girls' education. That's great. But, Chair Jolene, what is not prioritized but must become a focal point in accelerating progress towards gender equality is the need for this education to not only be high quality and universal, but for it to be publicly funded and free, because that's what makes it equitably accessible to all. Education is a human right and a public good. The growing commercialization and privatization of education is the greatest threat to achieving both SDG 4 on free quality education for all and SDG 5 on addressing the many barriers faced by women and girls in the current economic system and in accessing and using technology and innovation. In an analysis of 35 high and middle income countries in 2020, the 2021 Global Education Monitoring Report found that support for public provision of education remains strong. But despite this public support, the role of non-state actors in education is on the rise. At the same time, public education budgets have been shrinking. To fulfill the right to quality education for all, we need substantial investment in education and in teachers, public investments. And that, my friends, also means a need for adequate and fair taxation policies. The COVID-19 pandemic and the onslaught of climate disasters are showing us just what is at stake when education systems are not financed in ways that make them robust enough to withstand shocks and crises. The right to quality education that is publicly funded and free becomes an empty pipe dream for millions, particularly the most marginalized learners such as girls. Girls deserve to receive an education which is relevant, gender sensitive, and forward-looking. For them to fully engage in education and to thrive in the world of work, there needs to be a focus on 21st century skills. There must be equitable internet access for all children who must be protected from cyberbullying and other forms of gender-based violence. Girls must be prepared for work in the digital labor market and a green economy. Students have a right to gain the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to sustain our world for present and future generations. These are transversal skills that need to intersect and cross-cut all curriculum areas. It is also important that the teachers who will take up the responsibility for delivering these skills receive timely, free, quality training and professional development. As all of us get to work rebuilding education systems, all stakeholders must consider how best to tackle the underlying gender norms and social inequalities that prevent so many millions of girls from fully enjoying the right to quality education. It also requires us to consider how we can address the deeply unequal institutional structures that allow women and girls to disproportionately bear the burden of climate change, and among other things, exclusion from decent formalized jobs in tech. Women hold less than 25% of all jobs in the global tech industry. Let us not fall into existing unsustainable habits, relying on quick solutions that often depend on unreliable funding sources. Instead, let us pick up tackling gender and intersecting forms of discrimination at the center of all policies, measures and tools aimed at increasing digitalization in and through education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haldis, for your opening remarks. And these have truly set the stage for the conversations to follow now in our two panel discussions. So you stressed the importance of creating an enabling environment for girls through publicly funded education that is gender sensitive, gender responsive, and gender transformative. But in order to do this, there must be real change with regard to broader gender equality in society as a whole, and in particular with regard to girls' full participation in education, with a focus on 21st century skills. Now, your remarks here do bring us into our first panel discussion, and I would like to invite our first speaker, Ms. Magdalena Briere, to join me on video now. And with that, a very warm welcome to all of our esteemed speakers for our first panel discussion on preparing girls for the future world of work and the importance of 21st century skills. So my first question is for you, Magdalena Briere, Managing Director for Pro Futuro. So Magdalena, the Pro Futuro program has been improving the learning opportunities of millions of children in vulnerable environments. So based on your experience, how can we empower girls and young women in all their diversity with the skills to navigate life and truly thrive in the future world of work?
Thank you very much, Joylyn. So in one word, quality education adapted to the 21st century needs. But allow me to go first to the context and the challenges, and then move on to the solutions, or at least the experiences we have had. According to UNICEF, 24 million students are at risk of not returning to school after COVID schools closures. It goes without saying that most of those at risk are girls. The pandemic has revealed issues around what means to be enrolled in school that might not have been so obvious before. Schools are places where not only education is guaranteed, but also other basic needs such as food or safety are fulfilled. Just to give you some figures, 370 million children in 150 countries have missed their school meals in the last 2 years. 10 more million girls are at risk of early marriage in this decade than in the past one. By the end of 2022, 9 million additional children will be at risk of child labor. Numbers speak for themselves. When schools close, a lot more than education is lost. At the same time, when we invest in education, we invest in much more. In purely educational terms, the COVID pandemic has worsened an already complicated global situation. In 2019, the World Bank defined the concept of learning poverty to refer to the 53% of 10-year-old children in low and middle income countries that were unable to read and understand a short text appropriate for their age. UNESCO calculates that this figure could now potentially grow up to 70% due to the long school closures and the ineffectiveness of remote learning in many places during the pandemic. I have had the challenge and the privilege of running one of the biggest digital education programs in the world in one of the most difficult times for education in the history. While it is true that in the last 2 years, education has been at the core of the global debate, the reality is that this discussion comes at a very difficult time. There are so many priorities and needs generated by the health and economic crisis that education transformation and investments are at risk. Pro Futuro is a digital education program founded in 2016 by two main Spanish foundations, Telefónica Foundation and La Caixa Foundation. Our aim is to narrow the education gap in the world by improving the quality of education for millions of children living in vulnerable environments of Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. In order to reach our goals, we use technology, which allows us to reach more people and to create innovative digital teaching learning experiences that enhance the development of digital skills among teachers, students, and school principals. In a bit less than 6 years, Pro Futuro has benefited directly and indirectly through their teachers more than 22 million children in 40 countries, out of which 49% are girls. The numbers show that technology can be a powerful tool to democratize access to quality education, but it can also be an element that widens and worsens the existing digital divide. We face the challenge of access to technology and connectivity, but also the lack of digital skills, needed to thrive in the 21st century. From our experience, we know many interesting initiatives that encourage interest and participation in STEM subjects, many of them focused on girls and in vulnerable environments. It would take me too long to mention them all, but I wanted to share with you some conclusions we have drawn at ProFuturo on the characteristics these programs should have to succeed in this context, and especially to attract girls. Number one, experimentation. STEM subjects are deeply experimental. Playing and having fun are key for attracting students. Number two, awareness. It is essential to equip teachers with pedagogical techniques and practices to encourage students, and specifically girls, to take up these disciplines. Number three, information. There is a lack of knowledge about the many fields that can be studied and what career developments and opportunities these entail. Programs should include this dimension as well. And number four, mentoring. The lack of role models is also one of the most important elements preventing girls' participation in STEM disciplines. I hope that these ideas and our experience contribute to this interesting debate. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Magdalena, for the introduction to the work that ProFuturo is doing to provide quality digital education for girls in vulnerable contexts, and especially for your insights into the key issues that affect girls' education, because this further impacts their access to the labor market and, even more broadly, their role in society. So to build on these points, I would like to introduce Mr. Silas Ngayabosha, the Director General of Gender and Women's Empowerment at the Ministry of Gender and Family Promotion for the government of Rwanda. Silas, the government of Rwanda has made very bold commitments to the action coalitions to break down barriers that are holding girls back and help them access 21st century skills and successfully participate in the digital economy. Can you please share some of your ambitious plans with us now?
Thank you very much. I would first of all say that for the last 2 decades, Rwanda is seen as one of the fastest growing economies in Africa and the world, despite the traumatic memories of the 1994 genocide that are still prevalent, but they are gradually fading as associations begin to take a more positive form of a nation on the rise, powered by human resilience, a sense of common purpose, and a purposeful government. So future aspirations in this regard are high, with the Vision 2050 aspiring to achieve upper middle income status by 2035 and high income status by 2050. And this would only be possible if quality education and skills are needed to prepare girls and young women for the future world of work, successfully transition into the labor force and become leaders in the labor market is effectively done. And in Rwanda, education is first of all considered as a fundamental human right and an essential tool to ensure that all Rwandan citizens, women and men, girls and boys, realize their full potentials. And in addition, the government of Rwanda expressed the principle of equality of all Rwandans before the law, as well as equality between men and women in its constitution in Article 10, Section 4, as per the Constitution of 2003, as revised in 2015. And it clearly states that women shall occupy at least 30% of positions in all decisions-making organs. And education and STEM is a channel to this will. So among other key policies and laws, Rwanda has had also a new revised gender policy that provides policy actions that address gender issues in education sector, but also provides strategic guidance to engage more women and girls in STEM and TVT programs. And this beyond just gender sensitiveness, beyond the numbers, but a transformation of the environment to enable this. And the girls' education policy of 2008, being under revision now, is also meant to create a conducive environment specifically for girls in the education sector and ensure sustainable actions aimed at the progressive elimination of gender disparities in education sector. So this has been boosted by schools of excellency, for instance, for example, established for girls, and the free 12-year basic education, free. That was made free. And the Rwanda Coding Academy was also established to bridge gender digital divide among boys and girls, and encourage girls to join STEM. There is also the one laptop per child that was introduced to support science and technologies, where boys and girls are using a computer and internet to improve learning and research skills. The Imbuto Foundation, this is our First Lady's initiatives, has also an outstanding model of awarding the best performing girls completing primary and secondary education, which is a strategy of promoting a competitive spirit and inspiring other female students to boost their self-confidence and performance among others. And Rwanda has achieved a stable gender parity. We would say that for girls' enrollment in the primary, because we are standing now at 49.5% for girls and 53 in primary school and 53.3% in secondary education as per the 2019 school statistical yearbook. And the female in science combinations stand today at 55.5% with upper secondary students versus 44.5% of males. And however, we still have some challenges and where we should be reinforcing. We are aware that we should join efforts to challenge the negative cultural barriers and beliefs that lead to believe that STEM subjects are meant for boys and hinder full participation of women and girls in sciences and other considered mainly trades jobs. And we also are aware that we should reinforce effective implementation of the Rwanda's current commitment on technology and innovation for a gender equality coalition, where a number of targets have been committed to advance gender equality and create new solutions responding to women and girls' needs in all their diversity. In addition, women empowerment through digital technologies, a WEMTech strategy has been also developed among other mechanisms in place to ensure women are embracing science and technology. And lastly, our commitments to gender equality in technology and innovation come to complement a lot of efforts already made in line with other international commitments geared towards empowering women in the area of technology and innovation, such as the 2015 He for She and the African Smart Women and Girls Declaration of 2017. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Silas, for sharing the government of Rwanda's successes and ongoing commitments with regard to girls in STEM and the empowerment of women through digital technologies. I would now like to introduce Ms. Monica Kessier, the Senior Counselor in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Employment, Labor and Social Affairs Directorate, and the Head of Social Policy Division at the OECD. Monica, the OECD is a thought leader and has provided great analyses of the digital transformation of our societies. What can we do to help young women to thrive in an interconnected world and truly prepare them to adapt to the future challenges and opportunities of the ways in which we work?
Thank you so much, Joylyn, and thank you for the invitation to share the OECD's work and studies with you today. I have to say, a lot of our findings really correspond to what I've just been hearing this morning, that's just recently this morning already from from the other speakers. So let me perhaps just zero in on two specific OECD studies that can add to the discussion by bringing in another perspective. So two things that we have been looking at recently are career expectations of teenagers, because we know we have to start early in order to influence girls' occupational choices. And then also looking at what can be done to help them with career guidance. So many of you may know the OECD's PISA study on education, which asks in regular intervals 15-year-olds about all kinds of different things: educational achievements, mathematics, reading, and other competencies. But it also asks, for example, about parents' expectations for their children, and then also the teenagers' own expectations. And if you start with parents, for example, it's quite striking how parents' expectations differ between boys and girls. So when we come to the STEM and technology and digitalization issues, you can see that parents expect much more of their sons to go into more technical fields than for their daughters. So it starts very young. And by the time we ask them when they're 15, they've already had 15 years of living with their parents with unequal expectations for them. So what we saw then by asking them, we looked at which are the jobs that they aspire to by age 30. So you ask a 15-year-old, where do you see yourself at age 30 in what kind of jobs? And you know, what's quite striking is that they're stuck, these teenagers, despite all the social media exposure. Everybody's in Instagram and everybody is very modern in digital media use. They still aspire very much to traditional 20th century and even 19th century occupations. So what do they want to become? Doctors, teachers, veterinarians, business managers, engineers, and police officers. Those are the main occupations that they aspire to. And it's really quite striking, because they don't seem to be so much aware of what other opportunities this new technology and digital world can create for them. So we really need to do better on informing these children. And we also looked at how these career aspirations differ depending on what type of systems you have in OECD countries. And we found that those countries that have a strong and established vocational training, so vocational, for example, apprenticeships that are done, dual education, you spend some time in a company doing your apprenticeship, and then you also go to university or to other schools, they have a little bit of a wider view on jobs. So in Germany and Switzerland, for example, which are both countries that have a strong apprenticeship system, there's just 40% of those young teenagers that have such a limited view of only 10 jobs. But in Indonesia, on the other hand, 52% of girls and 42% of boys anticipate one of just 3 careers: business managers, teachers, and among girls, doctors, and among boys, armed forces. So that really is, to me, a very striking result, and it shows you how you really need to do better. And German teenagers with this more vocational approach, they show a wider range of career interests, and which better reflect the actual patterns of labor market demand. And gender is, as everywhere, a big issue here again, and still it's boys who expect to work in science and math and engineering. But it also shows that high achievers, so even girls that do very well in math and in science, they don't expect to work in those professions. So they lack the self-confidence, and even when they're good, they don't think that they're as good as boys. And that, of course, as all professional women know, is something that translates into attitudes throughout the life cycle later. And then the other thing we found in the report is that some of the young people don't really understand very well what type of education qualifications they need to get what type of job. So that's why we think it's so important to have good career guidance. And that's another study that we did at the OECD, where we had we looked at 10 countries, and we looked at the relations between their attitudes, the teenager attitudes and experiences, and better than expected employment outcomes at age 25. So we looked at what they wanted to become and how they did actually better than what they had aspired to. And we saw that there's 3 really important groups of things that are important to improve the situation. One is that you have to help students explore the potential futures in work, particularly through internships and so on. And let me just mention one really interesting example here in France, where there's a network of professional women journalists actually who have very good professional networks and are helping disadvantaged students to do their obligatory internship in school by using their networks and opening for them the whole idea of what is possible in the world of work, which they wouldn't have known themselves. So this is something that can be easily replicated in all countries and should be a good example for others to follow. Two other points, and then I will stop. They need to experience workplaces in firsthand through volunteering, part-time working. And the third point is that they need to really spend some time thinking about their futures, showing that they're trying to visualize and plan their transitions into work and seeing the relationship of their work aspirations with education. So Joy Lynn, that was just a short voyage into some of the work the OECD is doing, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing with us these exciting examples of successful strategies around the world, as well as OECD's vision and recommendations for meaningfully supporting and preparing young women and girls in their transition from school to work, and especially for promoting girls in STEM studies and related professions. Now, during our session so far, we have heard from global leaders and experts in the field on preparing girls for the future world of work and the importance of 21st century skills. Now, before we continue, we would like to introduce you to a few inspiring young women in Kenya through Akira Chicks and their Code Hive program, which was created by a group of Kenyan female software engineers who are passionate about changing the landscape of technology as a field. Now, they started just 10 years ago with a bus and a few computers to give girls in Nairobi's informal settlements a chance to learn more about tech. And they now have flourished into a campus that runs 9-month-long learning courses for girls in programming and in graphic design. So thanks to the support of many partners, including the Global Fund for Women, one of the Technology and Innovation Action Coalition leaders, you will hear about these girls, their amazing journeys thus far, and their hopes for their future careers. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Akira Chicks.
Tech was, just opening a laptop, being able to type on Microsoft Word, printing things. So that was like the bigger picture of tech when I was in school. Right now, I'm a graduate of Code Hive class of 2019. I'm a junior Android developer.
Because I didn't know how to even use a computer at first. So when we started during HTML classes, I had difficulties even in saving folders. But I never knew that I really enjoy coding like I do right now. I joined Akira Chicks because I loved tech and I used to participate in a lot of programs that were involving tech. And then I Googled what Akira Chicks does and I was like, wow, this is like so much and I need to know. I had unconsciously loved tech, not knowing, because after I finished high school I used to work in a cyber, so I just had this love for computers and I used to play with my mom's desktop till it got spoiled. And when I got here I just felt home. I felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. It's just when you know, when you have that feeling of, this is where I belong.
I have always had a passion for computers and technology in as much as I didn't know exactly what it was. So when I heard that it's a program that is related to STEM, which I thought was a great idea, I decided to join. Since I had joined campus as a computer science student but was unable to complete due to some challenges that I went through. So Akira Chicks came as a prayer answered and I jumped to the opportunity so that I could at least explore technology.
The family, the support that you get from here is out of this world. So I basically think it's very important for young women to go through this program.
I believe this is a place that young women
should join. It's a place that it doesn't improve on not only technology, it also improves confidence. I came here, I used to be shy, because I wasn't used to staying with a lot of people from different places.
It's important to go through such programs for ladies because you get this massive support from women, which you will not get outside there if you don't get exposed to these programs. You also get the hands-on skills, like it's mostly practical. We have the theory, yes, but it's mostly practical, of which practical is what is needed in the market.
Human beings are coherently selfish. So I've seen selfless humans and women supporting women, and it has been like a magical experience. So it's mind-blowing to think that a woman could go for sleepless nights to think about another woman who they're not related with by blood, how they're going to get better, how they're going to get school, food, sleep, and even just the soft skills and just take over the world. So that has been mine from deep here, like here.
Thank you to Akira Chicks for sending this inspirational video so that we could share their work and their aspirations with all of you today. Now, this brings us to our second panel discussion, and I would like to invite Ms. Mona Ismail to join me on video now. Welcome, Mona, and a warm welcome to our esteemed speakers for our second and final panel discussion today on supporting the transition from school to work and beyond. So my first question is for you, Ms. Mona Ismail, the entrepreneur in residence at Lifeline Ventures, who is representing the government of Finland. Mona, you are a young woman at the beginning of your professional journey, but you have already accomplished so much in working for one of the most prominent and active student-run entrepreneurship societies in Europe. Could you please share with us what you feel we need to prioritize to really help young women successfully transition from university to work and unleash their full potential?
Yeah, well, first off, great to be here, and thank you, Jolene, for the introduction. And it was really great to hear from the other speakers, really great topics that have been touched upon already. But yeah, I think for me, I could touch upon or give two different perspectives on how to approach that question. One is how can we support young women actually creating their own companies? And then kind of touch upon all the yes and how have our organization been a part of that journey. But then the second perspective would be then how can we actually help young women to transition into existing companies? But on the first point, how can we actually empower more women to create their own companies? Well, within all the ES, or well, the Entrepreneurship Society, it's a year-long term. So I was the president last year. And I remember when I joined last year, we have a really great history. There has been many successful founders that have come within our organization. But when I entered, there was this survey made by venture capital that in 2019 in the Nordics, 3.2 billion euro venture capital went, 93% of that venture capital investments went to all male founded companies. So 93%, and 1% went to all female founded companies. So yeah, only 1%, and the middle, which is 6%, was actually a mixture of founders, so males and females founding startups. So that is already alarming. And when entering then within the organization, thinking how can we actually help young women to create more companies? What is the actual problems that exist? Well, one topic that was already mentioned today was the lack of role models. So especially in the startup scene, it is quite male dominant, and although there is very competent women, very smart ones with bright ideas, there's still kind of this intimidation of can I become a successful entrepreneur? And even for you guys, if you guys are listening today, I'm thinking of 5 successful entrepreneurs that come to your mind. How many of those 5 are women? It can be that all 5 are actually even men. So for us, we really wanted to have an action-oriented approach, not just to speak, because there's a lot of speak. People love to talk. We can talk about it for the next 10 years. But how can we actually have an action-oriented approach and really tackle the issue? And well, I'd say that after the year, our method was to really give opportunities. So really give opportunities to the unrepresented, giving them the chance to experience opportunities that they wouldn't maybe. And it's for a limited, like every year we go to Silicon Valley, which is the heart of when it comes to entrepreneurship, and there's a limited amount of people we can take there. So who are then the people that we are taking there? And other opportunities, and also who are we giving our platform to? So when we are inviting guests to speak about their success stories of creating startups, are they all male? Because if we are just inviting one gender to give their story and their perspective, then it doesn't really attract the other gender then to approach that industry. So how can we then measure our success from last year? I personally, in the end of the year, was thinking, okay, after 5 years, I might then see some results, but it's already March. And from last year, there's a couple females founding their own startups that got accepted to accelerating programs this summer. And then the ones that are actually applying to accelerating programs are also creating their companies. And it's just March. So I can say that I am feeling already good about it, but you can maybe ask me about it in 5 years, how it looks like. But then to touch upon on the successful transition from university to the working life, I personally am an engineer and I have experienced working in a really big tech company. I was one of the rare ones in the engineering department that was a female. And I can say that it is very intimidating to be a young engineer student in a very male dominant environment. But then again, it can be also discouraging if you see that the leadership is all male as well. So I would say it can be in the tech industry. I mean, this is quite common in the tech industry, but even in other industries or in politics or whatever industry it is quite important that we really tackle the leadership and diversify the leadership, because there is a lot of changes in the recruitment processes in many respected companies where the recruitment process is redesigned. So we see more diversity there. But then really take a look at big tech companies and their leadership and tell me if it's diverse. And why that's important is that when young women are entering these technology companies, that is their quote unquote role model. So then it shows that, well, can I even be in the top if the top is represented by just one gender? So I would say, like, in concrete, diversifying the leadership is actually quite important. And well, in Finland, we have done a lot, and I really love, even in our university, it's one of the top in the world, and there is much more women entering in the engineering field, but we of course need more work in that sense. And well, at least for me, one of my role models when I was growing up was our president. In Finland, we had a female president, Tarja Halonen, and not only because she was female, but she was really good at what she was doing. She was really with the community, and I think that was really inspiring. So in conclusion, diversifying the leadership in the tech industry, in the politics, in every sector, it's very, very important that the decisions aren't just made by one gender. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona, for sharing your journey with us and also for really emphasizing the importance of role models and diversity in leadership, particularly with regard to STEM in both the school and the work settings. Thank you again. I would now like to introduce Ms. Sukti Dasgupta, Chief of the Employment and Labor Market Policies Branch for the International Labor Organization. Sukti, the ILO plays a significant role in helping to set global standards for, as well as improve our understanding of the labor market. How can the global community put into place effective policies and programs to enhance young women's access to decent jobs once they do transition into the world of work?
Thank you so much. And yes, indeed, the ILO works with the member states, with employers' organizations and workers' organizations to promote decent work for all women and men. But in the context of particularly the COVID crisis that we have just faced or just still facing, we know that women were particularly hard hit, and therefore, there is a huge role now for the governments, for workers and employers organizations to invest in jobs for women. And if I may say, our analysis and statistics shows that women overall were badly hit, but it was primarily young women in developing countries, in the middle income countries, who faced the brunt of it. In fact, in 2020, their employment declined by some 28.3% as compared to some 20% for young men. And what is also more worrying is that instead of moving into unemployment, they moved into inactivity. And therefore, the not in employment, education, and training rates have gone up significantly, and they stand at about 31.5% for young women now. And part of this is, of course, because we all know that there was a lack of jobs, there was disruptions to education, but also because many young women had to shoulder additional care duties while they were doing work from home. So really a key question for the policy community is really how to promote smooth transition of young women into the labor market, into education, and how to reduce what we call NEET rate, which is also SDG indicator 8.6, which is becoming even more difficult to achieve now by 2030. And as you know, the ILO's member states adopted a call to action for human-centered recovery last year, and it recognizes the especially disadvantaged situation for young people and for women. And it also called for urgent gender-responsive employment policies. And as you said, ILO is a standard-setting organization. It is a normative organization, and the normative framework of the ILO already offers some very important entry points for gender-responsive policies. And we are now working with a number of member states in Africa, in Asia, on operationalizing these policies. And just to give you a quick sense of these policies, they are coordinated and they have multiple dimensions. So you have the demand side for job creation, supply side for skills, in fact, also non-traditional skills, STEMs, etc., matching of the supply and demand, and very importantly, non-discrimination, because we know that even when there are opportunities, women don't always get them because of these discrimination attitudes and policies. But all of this has to be based on social dialogue. And I would also like to underline that job creation is absolutely critical, because if there are no jobs, where do these young people or young women transition to? So pro-employment macroeconomic sectoral policies, and you must have, there is now discussion around the Global Jobs and Social Protection Accelerator launched by the UN Secretary General, which the ILO is coordinating. And this focuses on creating jobs in the care economy, in the green sector, and in digital. And let me also note in this context the joint project of the ILO and UN Women on promoting decent employment for women through inclusive growth policies and investments in the care economy. And it's actually, focuses on both creating jobs in the care sector as well as creating the care infrastructure. And secondly, of course, skills and active labor market policies play a critical role. I won't go into the details, but non-traditional skills, non-traditional jobs for women are going to be key. And of course, the study of STEM, as the previous speaker was saying, and that is rooted in education policies as well. But active labor market policies will also help remove specific barriers, such as lack of access to childcare, which will be critical in allowing women to enter the labor market. And finally, implementation, really implementation of anti-discrimination legislation, equal pay legislation, preventing violence at work, And in this context, let me mention ILO's latest Convention 190 on preventing violence in the workplace. Now, while all of this is aimed at women, young women in the context of the crisis, more generally, action is required also to remove obstacles to women's effective access to decent work through prioritizing job creation, through investment in care policies and career infrastructure, and by ensuring dignity and safety of all women and men in the labor market. And there is a huge amount of work that still needs to be done in terms of creating or sensitizing gender responsive employment policies through tools, guidelines, capacity building courses, working with member states, workers and employers organizations to really drive this change through gender responsive policies. So let me stop here and back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sukti, for sharing the work of the ILO in this field, and especially for offering these remarks to our global audience about how each of our communities can put into place effective policies and programs to enhance young women's access to decent jobs once they have transitioned into the world of work. Now, to build on this, I would like to introduce Ms. Ulrika Grandin, the Deputy Director of the Coordination Team on Feminist Foreign Policy in the Global Agenda Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Government of Sweden. Ulrika, from the perspective of the government of Sweden and its experience in having a robust education system, could you please tell us what is essential for supporting young women in the transition from school to work?
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you for having me. And I, as you were saying, I work with the feminist foreign policy in the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And for Sweden, women's economic empowerment is really a central and key issue in our feminist foreign policy, but also in Sweden's history and work as a welfare state from the start. And we, as a co-leader of the Economic Gender Equality Action Coalition, we prioritize three issues. And the first one is to work against discriminatory laws and to work on social and economic reform for gender equality. And in this, we include access to social protection systems, to childcare, access to education, etc. And the other thing we are prioritizing is gender equality in the labor market and how important it is for women's economic empowerment to be part of the labor market and to be seen as role models in society and to be able to participate in society. And the third issue we are prioritizing in our coalition is the feminist trade policy, where we can see for a fact that women are not participating in trade as much as men are, and it's not benefiting women as much as men by trade either. For Sweden, and as I said, our own history of building our society, free education has been a key. Free and universal education has been a key component. And in 1842, when we introduced education for all, this was seen as something of a start of our welfare economy and also our society. And the schooling is financed by tax income, but I think it's a key issue here that if school is going to benefit all, we really need to have it universal and free. And the result of this is that in Sweden now almost everyone has a full-time education, and this gives girls and boys a route to jobs and a route to higher paid jobs. And in recent years, it has actually been a focus on boys not benefiting from school as much as girls. Boys are having lower grades, and they're also having more difficulty to get into higher education. But sadly, then after school, the gender gaps remain not benefiting women. Women get into the labor market, have high salaries, but with parental leave and with men, and I think that social norms and stereotypes play a great role here, men still are much higher paid than women, even if women have more education. So we have things to do, of course. What I think has been key maybe in Sweden also is that we have been focused quite a lot on vocational training for adults, and also to be able to change careers once you're out of school and in the labor market. And this has benefited women and men, of course, but also to add to their CVs and to start other jobs and to be flexible in the labor market as it changes. Of course, through development cooperation, we are supporting girls' education. It's one of our key priorities. We support you at UNICEF, and also UNESCO. We support the Global Partnership for Education. And we also see this as key to other issues, of course, like sexual and reproductive health and rights, and with sanitation, hygiene in schools, and also to escape from maybe violent and abusive family relations. So this connection is very important to us. But what I would like to do here is also to, since we're talking about transition into labor market, is to underline maybe the potential of the green economy for women and girls, since we see that green jobs could be focused on renewable sectors as energy and agriculture and ecotourism. There, I think it's great potential for women to take lead as being near and close to these sectors, both being dependent on these sectors, but also as a potential to be skilled and get into higher paid jobs. To help this advance this agenda, we have to, of course, strengthen women's and girls' education and training in maybe green sectors, and also, of course, in the digital sector, in order to women and girls to take lead maybe in this sector in the future. So these were some of the points I wanted to make, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ulrika, for sharing with us the Government of Sweden's priorities and perspectives on how to best support young women in their transition from school to work. And with that, I would now like to introduce Ms. Lani Cosette, the Senior Director and Chief of Staff for UN Affairs at Microsoft. Lani, Microsoft has long been a supporter of initiatives to help close the gender gap in STEM and provides digital skills to support new generations of female entrepreneurs. And we know that closing this gap is not just up to women and girls alone. So I'd like to ask, how do we create an environment that facilitates access to resources and tools with practical application that can help girls thrive in life after school?
Thank you, Joy, and thank you so much for including the private sector in the discussion. Before I get into your question, I also just wanted to react to the incredibly inspiring video and Mona's experience with women in startups and her experience in engineering. This gives me great optimism. But I was also really struck by the OECD research that Monica commented on regarding the career aspirations for women and girls. We have a lot more work to do there. I didn't hear technology as a career that girls might aspire to, but I would like to kind of provide a call to action that there are a lot of jobs for women in tech. I mean, I'm an example. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a data science, but we also need women to be advocates for tech and the role of technology in achieving SDG 5 in the Decade of Action. So we need data scientists and engineers, and we also need advocates, and women can play a really important role, I think, in really inspiring and driving the political will that's going to be required. So I wanted to now move to what Microsoft has been doing in our role on the Generation Equality Forum Innovation and Technology track. So for the last last 6 months or so, we have really been able to develop further a pilot project in thinking about how we can really refine our thinking and perfect how we can really scale our efforts to address digital inclusion and create economic opportunities for women and girls. I would say, in fact, it's digital inclusion and creating these opportunities that is really anchoring the work across the department and at Microsoft. Our premise has really been that digital equity doesn't just mean connectivity. Closing the digital divide, the gender digital divide in particular, is paramount, but we also need to address skilling and affordability. So even for those who have affordable broadband connection, there's still a lack of digital literacy, there's a lack of devices, and other kinds of socioeconomic issues that we've seen that continue to persist as barriers to entry. So we are seeking opportunities to work with a growing network of a multi-stakeholder model that includes governments, nonprofit, private sector partners, last mile providers, bring all of these elements together and really bridge the digital divide by addressing these issues in the specific context of gender equality. So our initiative has been focusing on deploying these connectivity solutions to increase the number of women and girls using digital technologies, but also at the same time providing global skills and education to support a new generation of female entrepreneurs and create economic opportunity. I think the key here, I've probably said scale about 4 times, and I think that is really key. I mean, this problem is enormous, it's global, and it's going to require a lot of work and effort. And I think paying a lot of attention to what this model looks like. You know, what does the world look like when we actually scale the solution? So I wanted to just comment a bit on some of the progress that we've been making over the last 12 months or so. We started with a project in Ghana. Our work is now, we now have 6 projects covering Kenya, India, Colombia, Guatemala, and Ghana, which I mentioned. These projects will continue to grow and expand. We're looking for new opportunities in new regions, new continents to really tackle this at scale. And I would say that a core component of our work has been really demonstrating that there is a new way of working with these multi-stakeholder partnerships that really leverage the unique skill set of global, local, and regional companies, NGOs, civil society, and also we should not forget the importance of funding and development banks that I think doors are really opening to provide all of these, to create all of these elements and really bring the programs globally. I will leave you with this example in Ghana with this project that we've been working on with the last mile provider Bluetown and a nonprofit, the Hunger Project. We've partnered with them to deploy connectivity in community centers that we refer to as epicenters. Each of these epicenters serves 5 to 7 communities. The communities include microfinance institution, a health clinic, education center, and a community gathering space. And this really is acting as an opportunity to bring people together. And this is also accommodating, of course, the reality and the expectation of what's going on in some regions and countries where connectivity in every household is not possible. So the community centers, I think, are creating a real hub of activity and inspiration. So it's been through these partnerships with USAID and Bluetown deploying connectivity that have really, I think, mobilized some of these communities. We're trying to train women in the communities to be digital operators, to manage internet centers, encouraging women's participation in the digital community writ large, but also creating the possibility for micro-entrepreneurial opportunities. So this pilot program is really aiming to address the gender digital divide, not just by connecting women and girls to the internet, but really harnessing the real opportunity that's available and putting all of these elements together. So we hope that the project will continue to expand. We're working hard to advocate, well, first of all, to launch these programs, but to really advocate more generally for trust and buy-in to this model, which is going to require a lot of funding, a lot of commitment, and also a recognition and acknowledgement that there isn't a one size fits all when we're trying to address these kinds of problems. But I have to say, it has been an incredible privilege to be part of the Generation Equality Forum. And it's really been a forcing function for us to think about how we tackle this problem, not just in a project here and a project there, but creating something that we think will really make a difference, because we have an enormous problem to tackle. And we're in 2022, so we've got 8 years. We're thinking about SDG 5, and we're very motivated and grateful to be part of this movement and learn from all of the great work that's going across all the various action coalitions. And of course, we're especially passionate about technology and trying to drive passion for women and girls in that field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lonnie, for this introduction to Microsoft's work and these wonderful examples from around the world as integral parts of Microsoft's commitment to really bridging the gender digital divide. I see that we have one panelist that has joined us. I believe it's Patty Alleman from UNICEF. I just want to confirm, Patty, are you there?
Hi, Joylyn. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. Oh, sorry, just one moment. Okay, there we go. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Ms. Patty Alleman, the lead for strategic partnerships in the Global Innovation Office for UNICEF. Patty, welcome. UNICEF has been the driving force in developing a collective commitment to expand the ecosystem of business and nonprofit intervention models focusing on digital literacy. Could you please tell us a little bit more about how this work was initiated and what you hope to achieve?
Hi, Joylyn. It's lovely to be here, and thanks so much for the question. So nice to see many friends on the call. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, UNICEF alongside a few different partners have been on this journey of really trying to value what the public sector and private sector have been delivering when it comes to programmatic solutions to really address the gender digital literacy divide. And a couple of years ago, we partnered with Gender Smart as well as Volta Capital to really do a landscape analysis on some of the most promising business models as well as public models around the world. And to really look at the trends on where are the money flows when it comes to ed tech and other types of similar investments. And so we produced a couple of reports that really did a landscape analysis. We really worked alongside all of our other fellow leaders in the Technology and Innovation Action Coalition of Generation Equality. And where we landed as a commitment alongside a few other partners, including UNCDF and Volta Capital and the government of Finland, is around the design of a gender literacy equity fund. And what this fund is being designed right now to do is to have a vehicle, a multi-funder investment vehicle that's going to be able to invest in the most promising public and private application models, programs on the ground that are intentionally looking at gender equity gaps when it comes to digital literacy, learning toward earning. And we have this in the works right now being designed, and it will be market launched this year with a 10 million initial investment envisioned. And just my last point is I don't at all think 10 million is enough. If we look at the numbers, we have hundreds of millions going toward ed tech solutions. We have hundreds of solutions out there that are promising, but not as a collective really learning from each other. But I think it's a promising way to mobilize collective money with shared outcomes that are going to be defined alongside women and girls who value these programs. And it's going to invest in the public and private models that we think have the most promise. So really look forward to working with all of you to design, shape, get it launched to market, and really scale up a lot of the work that many of you are leading. Thanks, Joy Lynn.
Thank you, Patty, for sharing just some of UNICEF's global innovation work with us, especially with regard to innovative financing solutions relevant to the school to work transitions for girls and young women. So your remarks and your call to action for collective financial solutions and shared outcomes do bring our second and final panel to a close. So for our participating audience members and distinguished guests, we do hope that you are inspired by each of these fantastic examples of action and of engagement that have been shared here today. Now, before we bring this session to an official close, we would like to provide some information about how you can get involved with Generation Equality and the Action Coalitions. So new commitment makers can join the Action Coalitions at any moment in the next 4 years. We are looking for partners interested in making bold and transformative engagements that can take the form of a financial, policy, programmatic, or advocacy commitment to one or several Action Coalitions. And by doing so, you will join a global community and you will have opportunities to co-create, to exchange ideas, and to develop collective commitments with leaders representing governments, private sector, civil society, international organizations, and youth networks. So you can check the Generation Equality Action Coalition's website to learn more about the commitments already made and the thematic blueprints which provide a framework for tactics to prioritize, such as law reform, improvement of service delivery or social norms, all of this to help generate targeted commitments and truly make an impact. And with that, we thank all of you for your kind attention today, and we wish you a wonderful rest of CSW 66. Goodbye.